Welcome to the Brandinc PR Podcast, where we dive deep into the stories and strategies of today's most impactful entrepreneurs, business leaders, and professionals. Whether you're building your brand, scaling your business, or just looking for inspiration, you're in the right place. Hello again, and welcome back to the Brandinc PR Podcast. I'm your fantastic host, Brandy Sims. Here with me, I have a special guest, Nikki Adebiyi. Hi, Nikki. How are you? How are you feeling today?
Hey, Brandy. Hey, everyone listening to this. I'm feeling good today. A little bit frazzled because it's just a Friday. Really looking
I
forward
feel
to
that.
a slower weekend, but that also means getting as much done today as possible. But I'm really looking forward to the weekend and I'm glad to be here.
Hey, and I'm glad to have you. I'm so happy that we had an opportunity to check in, to catch up. For those that are unfamiliar, we're both part of the Forbes BLK advisory community. So we help a lot in terms of the leadership, the professional development, the programming events that you see for Forbes BLK. If you're familiar with that group, but it's a global organization as part of the media conglomerate Forbes that specifically provides resources for Black professionals around the world. So that's how we got connected and just kind of got to see and follow each other's journey. So definitely with everything and really in light of everything that's going on just in the news, back here in the States, I felt like it was just such an opportune moment for us to have this conversation and really just talk about your experiences, even with your leadership and your grassroots efforts in developing more resources to Black professionals in that same vein that we kind of get introduced to each other with Forbes BLK. So I'm excited to dive in, ready for it. Okay, so just kind of, piggybacking off of that, of just what's been going on in the news and what's been going on just in the last couple of days, there's been a ton of rollbacks that we're seeing here in the States in terms of DEI. You name it, this company has dropped it. From Sam's Club to Walmart to Amazon, Facebook. There's been so many really big names that have taken a step back, but there have been also so many names that haven't. And so, I definitely want to hear from your perspective. What are the biggest risks of this shift from DEI, and how can individuals and organizations continue to push for meaningful change despite what's going on right now?
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's such a big question. And first of all, I'd just like to say I'm still mourning the loss of Target because that's one of the first
Mm,
places I usually go to when I'm stateside.
yep.
And frankly, I don't know where I'm going to get my stationery from here on out. So I'm so brokenhearted. But on a serious note, I think there are a lot of ramifications of the rollback of DEI, and honestly, I can't help but think the one at the forefront of my mind right now that I can't help but think about first is just we're in the era of the quiet part out loud. Like people are
Mm,
now coming forward with boldness, with brazenness, with their anti DEI, which often translates to anti-Black um, tendencies and beliefs. And so there is both a physical danger and as well as the psychological, emotional, spiritual, if you like, um, because it's like we've worked so hard over the years to try and build on the legacy of our political ancestors, our civil rights ancestors, social justice advocates, and activists. There's the word I'm looking for. And it's like, are we now trying to not just backtrack, but literally undo? Not to say that
mm.
things were fixed in the last few years. Like we still have issues with racism in institutions and in our societies, but we we've been doing the work, and so it feels like a slap in the face. It feels like like I can imagine people feeling like, what was the point? Was it worth it? And
Yep.
so that I would always have in response to that would be, it's always worth it. Like doing the right thing is always worth it. No matter the cost, no matter the risk that comes with it, it's important for us to strive to be people and communities of integrity and standing up for what's right. I'm a woman of faith. I'm a Christian, so I believe it's so important for each of us to acknowledge the image of God in everyone and treat people accordingly. And so the logical conclusion of that belief is you cannot be anti-Black.
Mm.
Therefore, you need to continue to advocate for diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, justice, because that's part and parcel of believing that all human beings are created equal. So I would just say that at the outset that we absolutely cannot fold our arms, or I know there's like this general sentiment of Black women, especially in the aftermath of the election outcome in the US, like Black women are saying, like, I'm not
Yep.
involved. This has nothing to do with me. And there's an element of, like, I understand that sentiment, but at the same time, when it comes to uh, standing up for our dignity, standing up for our humanity and our right to exist as such, that's not something we can ever fold our arms from, because
Mm.
as we can see, there is a task in front of us. Like, even whilst we were trying to make changes, what we're seeing now is the manifestation of what has been fermenting under the surface these past several years. And it's now come full on with full force. And honestly, we can't retreat. We
Mm.
cannot go, we can't hide, we can't run. And if we retreat, we end up being on the defensive. And even if you're in the defensive, you have to defend yourself. So I guess what I'm trying to say is we cannot allow ourselves to become so disillusioned as to inadvertently disempower ourselves. Like, don't let your disenchantment disempower you. So that's what I would say at the outset. And then when it comes to individuals and organizations, I think your question was, I would say, again, in general, all of us have to continue to do what we can with whatever we have in whichever ways we're able to. And it's going to look potentially different in different contexts,
Yeah.
especially that they're threatening sanctions and consequences for anyone who, in the States, anyone who tries to package DEI in another way, kind of like a Trojan horse.
Mm-hmm.
And it's gonna be difficult, and it's gonna take discipline. Excuse me. It's gonna take discipline and intentionality to sit down and think, how can we stand up for what is right to to the authorities that are threatening uh, our existence and everything that we hold dear to ourselves. So it's going to take some real effort and applying of our minds, I believe. But that said, just because it's hard doesn't mean it's not worth doing.
Mm.
I would still say that we have to continue doing the work, whether that's moving our efforts from explicit advocacy in the workplace to perhaps channeling those energies to the work we do, or the work that you do, because over here in the UK, we're still a little bit safe from the anti-DEI stuff. Although
Yeah.
today I saw an article about the polls concerning the British parties in the UK, and
Mm.
the party known as Reform UK, which is headed up by Nigel Farage, and he was a key factor in Britain leaving the European Union. So that anti-immigrant
Mm.
rhetoric is over here as well. And
Wow.
Reform UK are at the forefront of that. And now they are the leading party in the polls. That's over and above the the party that was last in government, and also the party that is now in government, which is the Labour um, party, which I guess some would say was kind of like the Democrats. So that is also stoking fear for us over here. It could be that in a few years' time, the UK and the US, we already been cousins in this whole racism thing and
I know that's
empire
right.
racism. But you know,
Yeah.
if we don't continue to put in the work, then
Mm.
we are unfortunately going to be um, holding hands and shaking hands even
Yep.
with this like national oppression, I guess. Um, so yeah, that's that. I just wanted to say that the UK, we are not immune from what's going on over there, and as they
Yeah.
say, when America catches a cold, the rest of the world sneezes. So we're
Oh.
starting to sniffle over
Yep.
here. Like we can,
Yep.
I
Yep.
can but yeah,
I
like
feel you on the sniffle. I feel
yeah,
you on the sniffle there. And
you
you know, and that's the reason why I wanted to ask you about that, because you are in the UK, you're UK based, you're a phenomenal leader. And those of you that are so new to Nikki, she's an author, a published author, founder of Bounce Black, also a trauma informed coach. So very, very heavy in the mental health space, very, very heavy in the entrepreneur space, and doing the work, the groundwork that's important and necessary to push these things forward. So, you know, yeah, that was the reason why I wanted to ask, because I was just curious, you know, what's going on in the rest of the world? Is this, are we going to see a domino effect? Is this something that, oh, we've already dealt with that? That was, you guys always been a little behind. You know, you always got that one family member that I sometimes that's us. I'm not even gonna lie. Sometimes that's us in America, where we have to sit there and we're just like just the deep sigh. But you made so many incredible points, and especially in the attitude of we can't stop the work, you know, and unfortunately when we talk about equality and equity, it's a fight that it doesn't just stop once we've achieved it. It's something that's a constant battle. We constantly have to fight for that right. And that, I know there was a really good quote, kind of in that same vein, from some of our early civil rights leaders, and saying
Angela
that, like,
Davis.
the work don't stop just because we got, you know, we got the Civil Rights Act, wonderful, but there was still stuff that needed to be done and continue to be done, because it was recognized very early on that it's not a one and done. We have to continuously fight. So I will definitely take ownership in that. Once the election was announced, and everything kind of was what it was, and the chips kind of fell where they did, I was one of the ones that, you know, FAFO. This is what you wanted. So I'm taking my cape. And I know that for a fact that I told a lot of friends this. I was like, listen, I am taking that cape off and setting it right to the side. I'm not coming to save y'all. Not from this. Nope. This is what you wanted. So I will take ownership that I had absolutely had this attitude this month where I was like, I'm done. I'm wiping my hands. There's nothing to do. I've tried. I was the 92%. I showed up. I advocated. I did what needed to be done, and it did nothing, because here we are, and now all of these things that are happening is just like, mm, well, but you're so right. You can't have that attitude, though. You can't. We had our moment. What I'm going to say is January was our Snickers break. Black people deserved our moment. We earned our moment because we showed up. We did show up. So we can't discredit ourselves and say we didn't. But now you're so right in that, okay, you had your moment. You breathed. Did you cry? Did you get it out? Okay, back to work, because the work still needs to be done. So I'm so happy that you said that, because I absolutely was a part of that committee of, mm,
And you know what?
hurt,
As
don't it? That's crazy.
like it's not even that black women in particular, because we
Hmm.
are always wearing capes. Um,
Always, always in the workforce, at home, always.
everywhere. But I think right now, it's not so much that Black women have to now come and clear up somebody else's mess. I
Mm.
think what the work is going to look like from here on out is
Mm-hmm.
our investment back into our own communities. So
Yep.
I am not envisioning continuing to bother with uh, people outside of our community,
Okay.
with the exception of allies, because it's really
Yep.
important to recognize that sometimes the people who can help you get to where you want to get to will not look
Yes.
like you, will not share your lived experience, but they have
Mm-hmm.
empathy and they have
Mm.
compassion and they want to be part of doing what is right. They don't function under white supremacy. And
Mm.
I think it's important that we welcome those people to join our efforts. But those efforts have to be channeled into
Yep.
rebuilding uh, our own internal community structures, um, fostering that sense of uh, unity and fellowship and communion, if you want to put it that way, and making sure that we are redirecting our resources, because there is a huge acknowledgement and fear on the part of the system
Mm.
about the power
Mm.
of the black dollar or the black pound. The black spend is massively powerful and capable of achieving all the ends that we want to achieve to advance ourselves forward. And that's what makes us a threat. And so
Mm.
the sooner we recognize that and leverage that, the better off we will be. And don't get me wrong, that doesn't mean that we will not experience attempts to sabotage, because that's what history has shown us, like Black Wall
That's what
Street
history.
and
Mm-hmm.
COINTELPRO and all of those, you know, political repression methods. Like I'm literally reading a book about it's called War at Home,
Mm.
US Covert Action Against Activists. And
Yes.
it's talking about
Mm.
the fears that intelligence leaders had about not merely uprisings, but the fact that Black people, should they come together, they have the power and the ability to overturn the economy, to upturn and flip everything upside down on its head. And it's so funny that, well, it's not funny because, you know, those tactics were heinous and wicked and cruel.
Yes.
But in a sense, it's just so fascinating that for years we've been made to feel inferior. But
Mm.
that treatment
Yeah.
that we received stems from their fear that we're actually capable of so much more. And so I think if as a community and as individuals, we can lean into that and work towards building our capacity to do for ourselves, then I think we ain't going to need these initiatives.
Hello. That part. That part. Well, so with Bounce Black, it was born from your personal journey with anxiety and depression. So, what was the pivotal moment that inspired you to transform your experience into a platform that helped to benefit others in that same vein that you're talking about?
Wow. Honestly, I call Bounce Black my life's work because quite literally, even though I launched it formally in 2020 during the pentatonic, panoramic, whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
even though that's when I launched it, it was years in the making prior. I had struggled with anxiety and depression growing up and just feeling less and less like myself the older I got. And, you know, that culminated in a breakdown during my
Mm.
undergrad studies. And for maybe 5 years, I just was completely detached from myself, dissociated. I was disconnected. I just didn't, I felt less than human. And it wasn't until I somehow managed to finish my degree, however stressful and draining and traumatic that was. It wasn't until I finished my undergraduate degree and was able to pursue regular therapy, which I had only become introduced to in my university as a result of the impact on my grades. So
Mm,
prior to then, I had no experience with therapy, only coaching. And so being able to attend therapy regularly and realizing that's the first time I've ever felt safe in a consistent way, that was it was doing something for me. Like I didn't yet have the language, but I know it was doing something for me. And then when I read a book called The Body Keeps the Score by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, that was the game changer for me. This was
mm,
maybe in 2020 something, or 2019 actually, probably 2019 because it was before I launched Bounce Black. But once I read that book, it gave me the language, it gave me the tools and the framework to understand trauma and how it affects your body long after the events that cause it. And once I understood that, I started to just, everything just started to fall back into place in terms of coming back to myself and feeling alive again. And then I just started to get to the point where I had already suffered throughout my academic life. And now I'm making this transition into the workplace, and it was such a struggle for me. But had I known what I now know much sooner, things could have been different. I didn't
mm,
have to go through what I did for as long as I did. And so it was after I quit my first job, December 2019, I'm sitting on my bed, and then the phrase bounce black just comes to mind.
mm.
And it wasn't until almost a year later, in August, September of 2020, that I actually decided to put it out there into the world at the encouragement of a former manager. And yeah, from then on, it's just been an incredible testament to the fact that my suffering wasn't in vain, because I launched Bounce Black with the intention of being who I needed and filling the gaps that I fell through. I couldn't be sure that other people were going through the exact same things, because I often felt like no one around in my immediate environment was going through the same things and
Yes. Hmm.
struggling the way that I was. But I put it out there into the world knowing that I just didn't know who needs this. And so I'm very thankful that about 5 years into this, um, it's just grown into something much more than I initially envisioned. Like, I didn't come into this with a strategy. I jokingly, but not jokingly, always say, I've been doing this, no strategy, just vibes. Like,
All
I
vibes.
didn't come in with some business plan and everything. No, it came from the heart. Like, this is my life.
Mm,
I
yeah.
lived it, and it was a lonely and isolating time for me. So I want to do my part to help other people feel less lonely through this journey of navigating school or work whilst dealing with your personal issues. And the more I started to heal, uh, the more I wanted to help others heal. And then what's amazing is that the more I desired to help others heal through my work, the more I healed myself. And so
Mm,
it's been such a blessing, honestly. And yeah, I get to have great conversations like this with people like you. And
yeah.
I'm just really thankful, honestly.
Yes. No, that's incredible. That's incredible. And it sounds like just what you were saying, that you created what you needed at the time when you went through everything that you went through. And we have so many commonalities, including this. And we talked about that offline of just our experiences, and definitely being someone myself that dealt with, pay disparity when I was in the workforce, then workplace discrimination, then having to, file a suit on that and then being retaliated against, even, years later, having that retaliation still coming up in many different ways. It's unfortunate and it's frustrating, it's disappointing, it's very isolating. So for you to take your pain and your suffering and what you dealt with to make something beautiful that people can benefit, that's incredible. It's incredible. And I'm so, thankful that you did something like that and were able to create something like Bounce Black to tap into the very people that need that assistance and need that support. We don't talk about mental health enough, especially as Black professionals in the workplace. We don't talk about it enough. We all have these stories, but I feel like we almost cocoon them within ourselves and just quiet it down. And maybe it has to do with just society and how we're received, that, oh, I don't want to sound like a complainer, or I don't want to sound like, negative, but these experiences are real and they do matter. And no, they should not be happening in 2025. If we are this progressive, why are we talking about and having these same stories of, I reported my office or I reported my workplace for discrimination and now I'm getting retaliation? What world does that make sense? If we're so progressive, these things shouldn't still be happening today, but they are. And so what are we doing to equip our people with the
Yeah.
resources so they know even what to go for? Because girl, even me, I didn't even know where to go for. I think I told you I didn't even file unemployment because I was essentially filing a lawsuit with this company and just trying to get, in a stable position, but also just trying to get support for what happened to me and what I experienced. And I just was, it was like a fish out of water experience. I didn't know where to go. Didn't have a lot of guidance. They, of course, weren't helping me. They're not going to help you, figure out what's going on within the organization. Unfortunately, HR isn't really for the individual employee as much as they're for the company. And that's one thing that I learned. And going through that, didn't nobody have my back but me,
Mhm.
you
And
know?
I think that's the hard part of it all. It's you're forced to learn the hard way. Get
Yes.
thrown into it. And I think this is what I struggle with the 2020s, especially post George Floyd, with all
Mm,
the Instagram black squares. It's all performative. And it's
yep.
exhausting and it's
Yes.
dangerous because there are people who are about that life. There absolutely are. But when you paint all of these optics about diversity, inclusion, and having people of color on your website banner, mind you, those employees left like 10 years ago, but whatever. Um,
Yep.
when
Yep.
you
And
have all
collecting
that,
that PPE loan from him too, girl. But we don't want to talk about that.
oh my goodness. And this is the thing,
Crazy.
it's just so deceptive, but it's like, oh, this looks like a welcoming place where I'll be able to flourish. And then you
Mhm.
apply, you get there,
Yep.
and this doesn't apply to all workplaces. Some places are what they seem like they are, but for those that aren't, oh my goodness, it's
Mhm.
dangerous because you can come out of there barely alive,
Mm.
barely coming out.
Yeah.
And like you said, I've had similar experiences, and that has also made me expand the focus of Bounce Black. So initially, it was just about psychoeducation and helping Black people to better talk about mental health. Because
Mhm.
when I was growing up, either we don't talk about it or we don't
Mm.
talk well. And I think
Yep.
it is important that we discuss those things, especially in relation to um, trying to progress in social mobility with our careers or our education,
Mhm.
because we are not we are not disintegrated people, like as individuals. We are whole beings. And so, you know, how you show up in the workplace is affected by your mental health. But your mental health is always your mental health is also affected by your workplace dynamic. And then you
Mm.
add in that the historic and ongoing baggage that comes with race, it can get really, really toxic and draining. And so I found it was really important to address those things, not in silos, but as interconnected variables that they are. And so on the other side of my own traumatic workplace experience a few years back, I decided that it's important that people not just know about their well-being in terms
Mm,
of like technical language around mental health, but it's also important that people know their rights in the workplace. And this is how um, I've been trying to change things in the last few years with regards to the direction that Bounce Back is going in,
mhm,
really trying to emphasize the importance of not just looking after yourself, but looking out for yourself. Because
mm,
we've learned so much the hard way. And what's crazy is that I can't even say that I didn't know this type of stuff happened because my mum has a story. But where I think I got caught slipping is I believed the optics. I believed the vision. I believed the the way I put it honestly is kind of
yeah,
like I went to Disneyland and, the Magic Castle, it looks amazing. Like there's so much fun happening around me. But then you enter the Magic Castle and find out it's a slaughterhouse. Like that's how my experience. I'm a
mm.
visual. I'm a
No,
visual.
I love it. Yes,
So even though it's quite a gruesome image, that
it's the
is
truth.
feels when in terms of the
Mhm.
toll that it takes on not just your confidence but also your psyche and your physical health. Again, we are connected beings. This affects all of this. So
Yes.
yeah, yeah, I could say a lot about this, but
Yeah. Yeah.
whew, employment law, it's important to know your rights in the workplace so that you
Mhm.
know to document as you go. And that's one thing that I have regrets about.
Yeah.
Um, it's important to try and de-escalate. Absolutely. Like don't pop off for the sake of it.
Yep.
I would always try and reconcile where reconciliation is possible, but
Yeah.
don't play yourself by not also documenting because
Mm.
receipts, yeah, now more than ever, receipts matter because
Yes.
they're collecting theirs. So you better be ready to collect yours as well because people have learned that, they don't teach us this in school,
Nope.
but people will lie. They will lie
Yeah.
on you in the workplace, and sometimes
Yeah.
they'll get away with it if they have
Yeah.
enough sway within the company. And
Yep.
if you don't have the receipts to disprove or prove your case,
Mhm.
the dynamics are racialized. White supremacy still is running rampant in the corporate world.
Yes,
And
it is.
white supremacy doesn't have to wear a white hood, it can wear a suit. And
Mm.
it's just about who gets believed when something goes down.
Yeah.
And, there's that phenomena of the white women's tears. I'm not even going to go into detail, but
Girl, that's another episode because we can get into that one. That goes even further because, the weaponization of it and the impact that it has, it's not talked about enough. Even though I think my husband had mentioned this the other day, he was like, "Do you remember that TikTok video of the white women that were just showing how they can cry on command?" And then they just stopped and then they just kind of did this like evil grimace. And I'm like, I remember that. And that is so crazy because at the time, even it was cringe then, and it's even more cringe now when you see everything that's happening and everything that has happened. So it's like there's such a historical piece to this and a repeated history in this that is just it was not even factored or considered. But I digress. It does still impact us today. And
absolutely.
as
And I
soon
think,
as a tear drop,
mm,
everyone's got to pause like, uh-oh,
honestly, and this is
that's wild to me.
the irony is that these are
Yeah.
the very dynamics that drive Black people out of the workforce because
Mm.
they're traumatized. And
Yep.
then we wonder why there's a lack of representation in leadership. We wonder why Black people are
Hello.
not progressing. We wonder why they're not being promoted. It's because if you get to the top, they've got battle scars. They've got serious wounds that they've had to, you know, just completely soldier through. Most of us, at least I'll speak for myself. My body is too sensitive. I cannot. My threshold for tolerating toxicity is very low. Is very low. One thing about me, I'm gonna leave. I'm gonna quit because you're not gonna kill me on the job. Um, and there are so many of us like that who are, if not driven out, we're forced out. And what does that then look like? Oh, there we go.
Hey, hey, business rock stars. Got big PR plans for 2025? Then you need the 2025 PR Plan and Workbook. It's your step by step guide to owning the media spotlight, building buzz, and making big moves this year. And guess what? Early bird pricing is live right now, but it won't last long. So why pay more later when you can snag it now and save those extra coins for coffee runs during media pitch marathons? I don't know. Go grab it today because once it's gone, well, you'll be wishing you hit that buy button sooner. Let's make 2025 your breakout year. Early bird pricing ends soon. Visit brandingpr.com/resources. Okay, so we've covered so much just in this conversation. I mean, where you've talked about, your own personal experiences that help to create, bounce black through from trauma to something that's super informed and super helpful and beneficial to the Black community. And just the overall stress and struggles that we go through, and even here in the US, dealing with the DEI rollbacks and what does that mean for our community. So we've just covered so many different things. So I want to hear from you, and speaking a little bit more on that mental health side of things. What would you say? Well, really, let me rewind that. You've written a lot about the intersection between race and mental health, right? So, based on your research, what are the biggest gaps do you see in mental health support, really, for the Black community as well as minority and marginalized communities? And how do you think we can start closing those?
Yeah. So the research that I've done with the mental health research networks that I've been part of has actually focused on the effect of racism on children and young people's mental health. But what we found with young people can be applied broadly to our community, namely that there isn't enough representation amongst the psychologists and therapists and practitioners who can support our communities. There aren't enough Black people in those fields. So there's a lack of representation there. And with lack of representation also comes often lack of an understanding of our experiences. And the other side of that issue is that these services that do exist aren't always culturally competent. So there's two sides. There's the lack of Black therapists, and then there are the therapists that, your therapist doesn't have to be Black, but they do have to be able to understand where you're coming from and not place too much of a burden on you to educate them, because that's your time to heal.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
to be carrying weights that you're trying to heal from in that space. So that was something that has been found, and I think it's been a mainstream issue here in the UK, where we know that the research shows that Black people are underserved by prevention services, but they are overrepresented by crisis intervention. And I think that's just a really, really sad statistic and a sad fact, because it means that people in our communities aren't getting the early intervention that they need that can make a difference to their lives, but instead it's when they get to breaking point that they become known to mental health services, and that's a real problem for us, and we have to focus our efforts on dealing with the root causes of that, which is often addressing the causes of a lack of representation, and then also making sure that psychologists and therapists are trained to relate to our experiences, even if they haven't shared those experiences, but to approach with empathy and compassion and not place so much of the weight on us to yeah so much of the weight on us to yeah to educate them. Yeah.
Absolutely. No, thank you for sharing that. As a trauma informed life coach, you guide individuals into and through their healing journey. What are the common barriers that you see when people, begin this work, and how do you help them move forward?
Mm. So the first thing I would say is that in my experience, there are many Black people, young professionals, early careers, who they just haven't had coaching to begin with, and so they don't know what to expect. But somehow the stereotype of coaching seems to be just someone who's really, really pushing you, like those YouTube motivational clips, like how bad
Yep.
you want it. Like I think
Yeah.
that's the conception that people have around coaching. And maybe for some people it can look like that. But with me being a trauma-informed life coach, it's about practicing the principles of being trauma-informed, which I think the less expansive version or the summarized version of those principles. I think I can't remember the State Department that coined the principles. There's about maybe 6, and then within those 6 principles they have all these different subcategories, but the ones that I always remember that encapsulate the wider principles are that you need safety, you need empowerment, and you need healing. And so I make sure to bring that or create that space for my clients, regardless of their background, because it's really important to, again, understand that we are whole beings. We can't divide ourselves up. And so whatever's going on outside of the workplace eventually does seep into the workplace. And also the reverse happens, like what you're experiencing at work, you take home with you. And so
Yes.
it's really important to address holistic barrier, like the holistic aspects of thriving and being successful. It's not just about the doing, but also your being, like who are you and how are you, and bringing to the forefront some of the things that aren't as obvious, in terms of the role that they play in your performance. Because if you're not well within yourself, eventually, the way I think of it is trauma is like an elastic band. You can only go so far before it starts to claw you back. And so with my coaching practice, it's about just tailoring every session to the person in front of me and to their story. We coach around their needs and their stories. So it's really a listening exercise and a relating exercise, because I bring empathy to everything, because I
Yes.
live this, I've lived it, and I often find myself working with people whose stories bear so much resemblance to mine. And so, again, it's just that sense of really feeling like I'm living in my purpose and my suffering was
Yes.
in vain, because now all of the lessons that I've learned painfully along the way, I'm able to offer that to make someone more at ease on their journey. So.
I love that. I love that. So you're a founding member of the Black Women for Liberated Workplace Coalition. what does a truly liberated workplace, if I can say it, look like to you?
Ooh. Mm.
A truly liberated workplace.
Really, I think
Mm,
when optics match
mm,
practice,
mm.
I think it's important to communicate what you stand for.
Yeah.
It's important to communicate your values. I don't want us to stop doing that. I just want to see more organizations not just talking, but also being.
Yeah.
And again,
Mm,
it's not just integrity is not just individual, it's
yeah.
institutional, it's organizational. And so I really do believe that um, the key to being liberated at work is
Mm,
to avoid the historical traps mentally, culturally in an organization that lead us to feel oppressed. So whether that's tackling all the different ways in which white supremacy manifests in the workplace, like we've spoken
mhm,
about retaliation, and we've also spoken about white women's tears being weaponized. Those are
mhm,
examples of oppressive practices filtering through organizations, which are a form of white supremacy. Like, who gets
mhm,
believed when you go to HR and you describe your
mm,
experiences of being harassed, bullied, discriminated against, but someone weaponizes their tears and they are believed over and above you when in fact you're the actual victim. So I think it's really important to um, discern the different ways in which white supremacy manifests itself. Another one is blacklisting. Again, that's part of the retaliation. Like having so much power that you can go out of your way to affect someone's livelihood. You don't want them to progress in
mm,
life because they've offended you or you don't like them or you're jealous of them, whatever the reason is. That is another form of white supremacy
mhm,
because you don't like that I'm thriving because I'm black and I'm
mm,
audacious with it.
mm,
And that kind of like know your place energy, that's white supremacy. That is oppression in the workplace. And so a liberated workplace is a workplace in which the culture is free of those things.
mm. You are preaching
Because
to us. Okay, you are preaching to us.
I will
You
put
know,
on a robe right now and bring it.
yeah,
There's so much to be said about
it
this.
is. It is. There's so much to be said, and there's more that needs to be said. So conversations like this is why it's important, because we need to be talking about it and calling it out and calling it what it is and
Yes.
not sugarcoating. I think there was a period of time where we did kind of try to, like, it's almost like softening the blow, right? Like, oh, well, I don't want to offend, and oh, I don't want to make you feel bad. It's like, if you feel bad, that's you, because I'm not here to do that, but I am here to educate. I am here to share my experience in the hopes that it can create change, in the hopes that it will stop repeating itself,
Yes.
because and that's what having empathy is about. You
Absolutely.
mentioned earlier about being a Christian. Like, that's the root of being a Christian, is love and emphasizing empathy and having that sympathy for people, both
Absolutely.
of them.
Absolutely.
And we're seeing that just kind of be downplayed, and oh, well, no, that's the core of the book. That's the
Absolutely.
core of the word of God. So if you're practicing something else, that's no longer Christianity, because that's at the root of it. You have to care about people. You have to care about your neighbor and have a sense and feel of duty
Good.
to protect them. You
Right.
know what I'm saying? So you dropping gems, girl. You are dropping gems. So okay, so before we wrap up today, I have another thing I want to talk about with you. As a published writer, you've been featured in top journals, publications, platforms. How do you see the role of media and communications in shaping public perceptions of mental health, and particularly for our community, for the Black community?
Ooh,
Yeah,
man.
I got to get this one in, because we're
Woo.
PR and communications here at the Branding PR Podcast. We
Makes
got to get a Combs question in here.
makes sense. And I love that question
Yeah.
because to me, it just seems that it's very simple. Like, the reason there is so much stigma around mental health in our communities is because of the stories we've historically told ourselves.
Mm.
So it's always to do with communications. It's always to do with the narratives that we come up with to explain things that we don't understand. And I think media and communications is, you can't change perception without communication, and you need to communicate through a medium. So it's absolutely critical, and that's why the earliest version of Bounce Black was simply just about educating our community about different mental health conditions and how to go about dealing with them. And just again, I think there's a phrase that goes, name it to tame it. If you do not have the language to frame your experiences, you will struggle to overcome what you're going through, because you literally don't know what it is that's happening. And so where do you start with recovery? You know, it's hard to cure a disease that you don't have a diagnosis of. You don't understand the symptoms. How are you going to cure that? So I think it's really important that we start telling ourselves better stories about mental health. And I think our generation is definitely going to be part of that shift.
Yeah.
I remember sharing that I had stressed my parents to go to therapy for so
Yeah.
long. And unfortunately, it took my dad passing away for my mom to pursue that. But
So
nevertheless,
sorry.
she came to.
Yeah.
I think I'm just grateful that she
Yeah.
eventually came around, because she saw the benefit of it.
Mm.
And so I want us to get to a point where we don't wait till the absolute worst happens. And that's it's gonna start by people sharing. People like myself who, like, I don't let shame overtake me in this area anymore. Like, the way
Yeah.
I suffered, I am not now going to further do damage to my nervous system by inflicting um, just angry energy on myself.
Yeah.
Suffering is suffering, and
It is.
we need to be comfortable with talking about that and how hard it is, to go through things in life. And we need to be comfortable putting language to that and sitting with the discomfort that comes with having these conversations, because that's how we get free. You can't heal what you haven't processed, and you can't process what you haven't acknowledged. And language is kind of like the midwife that helps deliver that recovery, healing, overcoming process. And so I'm very passionate about helping our communities become better educated around what's going on in our bodies, in our minds, in our brains. Because the only reason we are where we are is because we've told ourselves stories that haven't
Yeah.
helped us. So it's time to tell better stories, essentially.
There you go. Well, this has been an amazing, amazing conversation, girl. I feel like we need another part two, and I feel like I say this all the time, but we have such good conversations, and we really open this up. So I want to say that I thank you and I appreciate your time so much and being a part of this, really and truly. This is a conversation that's needed to be had, and the timeliness, girl, the timeliness of this topic,
Woo!
series of topics is so important and so relevant. But what I want listeners to really know is that there are resources. There are resources available like Bounce Black, that can help support you as you're going through it. You're not alone in this. So that being said, how can folks get a hold of you? How can they connect with you? How can they find out what you've got going on? And tell us if you have some upcoming events that we can support.
Absolutely, absolutely. So bounceblack.org, that's the website. And just to spell it out, because I don't know how it's going to sound in the audio, but there is an L, bounce black, as in black people. Because sometimes people think I'm saying bounce
Mhm.
back, but it's
Yeah.
tailored to our community, so it's definitely bounce black, BLACK, and .org, and on that website you will find everything that we're up to. You will find all of the services that we offer, but also you will find the free resources that I have created that are tailored to our experiences with regards to mental health, uh, racial equity, and careers and education, various topics, but it's tailored to our experiences. And there are also kind of like a library of different services that are available. So I'm very passionate about community and collaboration. And so I am building a platform that platforms. So you will find a list of services and other resources provided by other organizations, because we can't ever do this work alone. It's all hands on deck. So
There you
you'll
go.
find there, you'll find events. Um, God willing, this year we will finally be launching the podcast,
Mhm.
the Bounce Black Pod. So stay tuned. But honestly, check out the events that we've got coming up. Next week, actually, I'm going to be in New York, your side of the pond, to talk all things Black love and how the bridging the gap between Black men and women, and how the divide between us is hindering our ability to build generational wealth as a community. And so I'm really looking forward to that conversation. We've got Maxine Williams, who is the founder of We Met IRL. And then we've also got Jonathan Kirkland, who is head of brand and marketing at BLK, the dating app for Black people. So we're going to be talking about all things related to love, respect, and healing between Black women and men. So check it out if you're
Yay.
to February the 7th. Come through if you can. If not, just keep an eye out for what else we've got on, because this year is going to be a year.
It is. January has already been a year, a long year. Okay.
Indeed.
So as always, thank you so much. And to our listeners and those that are following us, or if you're not following us, please follow us at Brandinc PR. Every week we'll have a new episode. So don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and have a wonderful week. We'll see you next time.